We stand at a crossroads in South Asia, a moment not only of national reflection, but of deep regional consequence. The winds of change are sweeping across the subcontinent, and questions echo across the corridors of history. Will Pakistan fall? What lies behind India's growing influence on the global stage? These are not questions of fear, nor of triumph. They are questions of understanding, of responsibility. For we do not build peace, prosperity, or purpose by watching our neighbors fall. We build it by rising together, by seeking truth without prejudice, and by confronting injustice without hate. Let us not be distracted by the noise of division or the propaganda of power. Let us instead engage in honest reflection and clear-eyed inquiry, because the future of one nation can never be secure if it is built upon the failure of another. This is not a speech of condemnation, nor of celebration. It is a call for awareness, a call to awaken the soul of South Asia and remind ourselves that dignity, justice, and progress belong not to one people or flag, but to all who choose unity over conflict and courage over silence. Throughout history, the true strength of any nation has never been measured merely by the size of its army or the wealth of its elite, but by the justice it delivers to its people, especially to the weakest among them. Injustice, when ignored, does not disappear. It grows in silence, it festers in forgotten corners, and eventually it emerges with force, shaking the very foundation of a nation. Pakistan, like many nations in the world, faces challenges not simply because of external pressure or foreign policy missteps, but because of deep, unresolved injustices within its own borders. When the cries of the poor are unheard, when minorities are marginalized, and when truth is silenced by fear, a nation begins to hollow itself from within. No matter how strong a country may appear to the world, it is the voices of its own citizens that define its real character. If those voices are muted by inequality, corruption, or systemic oppression, the country risks imploding, not by enemy fire, but by moral decay. The world has seen this pattern many times. Empires rise on injustice and fall by its weight. A free press, an independent judiciary, an honest bureaucracy, these are not luxuries of democracy, they are the pillars of stability. Without them nations do not govern, they command. And where there is command without consent, rebellion is not far behind. The Pakistani people are resilient, strong, and full of potential. But potential cannot bloom in the shadow of injustice. A young student with dreams must not fear speaking the truth. A journalist must not tremble when writing a headline. A worker must not be afraid to demand fair wages. These are not acts of rebellion. They are the heartbeat of democracy, and if the state begins to see its own citizens as threats, it has already begun to lose its moral compass. No external enemy can destroy a nation faster than internal silence imposed by fear. It is easy to blame others for our misfortunes. It is far more difficult, and far more noble, to confront our own failures. Injustice is not always loud. Sometimes it is the quiet exclusion of a rural community from health care. Sometimes it is the slow erosion of education, or the unpunished abuse of power. These silent injustices are just as dangerous as loud violence. They plant seeds of despair and alienation, and when millions feel unheard, they do not always rise in unity. Often they turn to extremism, to anger, to hopelessness, and then a nation begins to burn from the inside. Let us not pretend that injustice is someone else's problem. It belongs to all of us. When a child in Balochistan is denied education, when a journalist in Islamabad is abducted, when a laborer in Karachi is exploited, we must not look away, because to ignore their pain is to allow the fracture of our own unity. True patriotism is not blind allegiance. It is the courage to question, to challenge, and to improve. and until we learn to confront the injustice we see, no matter how uncomfortable it may be, our foundations will remain fragile. Would you like the same expansion done for the other keynotes too? Certainly. Here's the 600-word expansion of Keynote 2. India's rise reflects strategic unity, not mere strength, written in the tone and spirit of Nelson Mandela, without heading or ending sentences. India's emergence on the global stage is not an accident of geography or a mere result of economic growth. It is the outcome of a calculated and sustained effort to build internal coherence while aligning itself with global opportunities. While military strength and economic size play their role, they are not the foundation of India's rise. What truly defines its momentum is a strategic unity, an understanding among its institutions, industries, and international alliances that national progress must be cohesive and continuous. When a nation begins to think beyond the narrow interests of one political party, one province, or one class, and instead aligns its long-term goals across sectors, education, technology, defense, diplomacy, it creates a rhythm of progress that resonates far beyond its borders. India, despite its internal challenges, has cultivated a strong narrative of aspiration and innovation. Its diplomatic policies have shifted from reaction to strategy, its economic reforms from short-term fixes to structural transformation. This is not simply strength. It is planning, coordination, and an ability to project national will with confidence and clarity. Countries do not rise because of what they possess. They rise because of what they are willing to build. India has invested in its technological sectors, expanded its global partnerships, and created a presence in forums that matter. From Silicon Valley to the United Nations, it has learned the language of diplomacy and technology, science and economy. Its voice is now present in conversations about artificial intelligence, climate change, and trade reform, not because of military might, but because of the groundwork laid by decades of institution, building and policy continuity. Unity does not mean the absence of disagreement. Unity means that amidst disagreement, there is still movement toward a shared vision. India has managed to hold together a nation of vast ethnic, religious, and linguistic diversity, not perfectly, not without injustice, but with a commitment to a common future. It has balanced tradition with modernization, nationalism with globalism, and public sentiment with institutional direction. This is not easy to achieve, nor is it guaranteed to last, but it is undeniably a reason for its current standing. The world recognizes nations not just by their capacity to defend their borders, but by their capacity to contribute to global stability. India has been a consistent voice in multilateral diplomacy, peacekeeping, and trade development. It has built trust by showing consistency in its commitments. That consistency builds credibility, and credibility builds influence. Nations that are divided within, or that change direction with every change in leadership, struggle to command such influence. The lesson here is not to imitate India, but to understand that long-term vision and unity of purpose are the scaffolding on which global power is built. Strength alone can intimidate, but unity commands respect. Many nations have had stronger economies or larger armies, but they faltered because their internal divisions weakened their global resolve. India has been tested by terrorism, poverty, and social unrest, yet it has moved forward by prioritizing strategic partnerships and technological growth. Its rise is not without criticism or contradiction, but it is fueled by a determined effort to align its national narrative with its global ambition. For nations like Pakistan, the question is not why India is rising, but what can be learned from its path. It is not military comparison or nationalist rhetoric that will decide the region's future. It is whether countries can unify their internal voices around shared development, transparent governance, and regional cooperation. In that lies true strength, not the kind that conquers others, but the kind that lifts itself through vision and unity. Would you like me to continue with Keynote 3 in the same tone and length, of course? Here's the 600-word expansion of Keynote 3. A nation falls when it forgets its people, in the tone and spirit of Nelson Mandela, without heading or ending sentences. A nation's greatness is not measured by the wealth of its elite, the speeches of its leaders, or the flags waved during parades. It is measured in the daily dignity of its people. The farmer who tills the soil, the teacher in a rural classroom, the nurse in a crowded hospital, the child who walks miles to school. When a country forgets these people, when it no longer sees their struggles, hopes, or sacrifices, it begins to lose the very soul that sustains its strength. A nation is not its buildings, borders, or slogans. It is its people, and when those people feel abandoned, betrayed, or unseen, no amount of military might or economic promise can prevent collapse. A government may speak in the name of the people, but if it does not serve their basic needs, food, shelter, justice, opportunity, it becomes an institution detached from its roots. Disconnect between leadership and citizenry does not emerge overnight. It grows slowly, silently. It begins when policies are shaped in elite boardrooms rather than village councils. It grows when laws protect the powerful and leave the poor defenseless. It becomes dangerous when voices of dissent are treated as enemies rather than patriots. These are the early warnings that a nation is beginning to forget its people. In many parts of the world, and in Pakistan especially, the weight of history and hardship sits heavy on the shoulders of ordinary citizens. They endure inflation without protection, injustice without recourse, and unemployment without hope. And yet, in spite of it all, they remain committed to their homeland. They do not seek to destroy it. They seek to be included in its promise. But when generation after generation sees no change, no reform, no sincere effort uplift the masses, frustration turns into disillusionment, and when people stop believing in their country, the fall is no longer a question of if, but when. True leadership does not lie in controlling the narrative or silencing criticism. It lies in confronting the uncomfortable truths that prevent progress. A child in Thar dying of malnutrition is not a statistic, it is a national failure. A journalist fearing for their life is not a threat, it is a sign of institutional weakness. A young graduate without a job is not lazy, they are the face of broken promises. If a nation turns away from these realities, choosing comfort over courage, it sacrifices its future for a fragile illusion of stability. History teaches us that revolutions are born not only from oppression, but from abandonment. When people feel invisible, when they believe their pain does not matter, they begin to look for alternatives, some of them peaceful, some of them not, and the deeper the abandonment, the more extreme the alternatives become. Extremism is not the cause, it is the symptom. Corruption is not an isolated act, it is a reflection of systemic decay. If the people are no longer at the center of the national agenda, the state itself becomes unsustainable. To build a future, a country must first recognize its foundation. That foundation is the will, the labor, and the trust of its people. They are not burdens on the state. They are the builders of the state. Their voices must not be feared. They must be heard. Their needs must not be negotiated. They must be met. Only then can a country move forward, not through force or propaganda, but through legitimacy born from service. If a nation remembers this truth, it may yet rise. If it forgets, it risks falling, not by invasion, but by erosion from within. Would you like to proceed with Keynote 4 next? Certainly. Here's the 600 word expansion of Keynote 4, global power is earned through responsibility, not dominance, written in the voice and tone of Nelson Mandela, without heading or closing lines. Power in the modern world is no longer simply the ability to command, to control, or to conquer. True global power is the ability to influence through example, to lead with dignity, and to shoulder responsibility not only for one's own people, but for the well-being of others beyond one's borders. The age of colonial empires, of brute domination, is over. What the world respects today is not the reach of a nation's weapons, but the reach of its values. It is not how loudly a country speaks, but how wisely it listens and how consistently it acts in service of peace, justice, and shared prosperity. A nation may possess military strength, economic resources, and technological advantage, but if it wields these tools to intimidate rather than to uplift, it gains fear, not respect. It gains obedience, not trust, and in the long run, such a posture breeds isolation, resentment, and opposition. Dominance breeds resistance. Responsibility invites cooperation. In an interconnected world, no country, no matter how powerful, can afford to act as if it stands above others. Leadership must now be earned through compassion in policy, fairness in trade, restraint in conflict, and generosity in crisis. When we look at the global stage, it becomes clear which nations are rising through responsible stewardship, and which are trying to hold on to relevance through coercion. It is not enough to declare oneself a superpower. A true leader of the world must act with the wisdom to know when to act, and humility to know when to stand back. It must commit to principles that serve the many, not just the privileged few. The climate crisis, poverty, forced migration, and pandemics have shown us that strength is nothing if it does not serve humanity. A nation that pollutes the earth for profit, exploits weaker states for resources, or fans conflict for geopolitical gain may win in the short term, but it loses its moral standing in history. Responsibility means creating stability, not just for allies, but for all. It means engaging in dialogue even with adversaries. It means using influence to mediate, not manipulate. It means holding oneself accountable before holding others to account. This is the kind of power the world now desperately needs, the power that can unify, reconcile, and reform. Nations that rise on this principle do not simply dominate headlines, they shape the future. Too often, we mistake dominance for strength because it is loud, visible, and immediate. But the power of responsibility is quiet, patient, and enduring. It is seen in nations that send peacekeepers instead of troops. It is felt in countries that open their borders to the displaced. It is admired in leaders who choose negotiation over escalation. These are the acts that mark the maturity of a global power. They may not produce the roar of battle, but they echo through generations. There is a lesson here for all rising nations, including those in South Asia. The pursuit of influence must not come at the cost of conscience. Whether it is India, China, the United States, or any nation aspiring to global leadership, the world is watching not only what they build, but how they build it. Global power without global responsibility is a threat to peace. Responsibility without justice is a betrayal of leadership. We must all remember that the power to shape the world is a privilege, and like all privileges, it comes with duty. Nations must earn their place through the trust of others, not through fear. Only then can they truly be called great, not by their size or wealth, but by the responsibility they embrace in service to humanity. Would you like the expansion for Keynote 5 next? Certainly. Here's the 600-word expansion of Keynote 5. Pakistan's future depends on internal reform, not external blame. Written in the tone and spirit of Nelson Mandela. Without a heading or closing sentences, Nations do not fall because of enemies at their borders, they fall because of decay from within. A country that places blame for its failures entirely on outside forces denies itself the opportunity to evolve. It chooses victimhood over responsibility. While no nation exists in isolation, each affected by global politics, foreign influence, and historical burdens, it is still the internal choices that determine the course of its destiny. The world may apply pressure, but it is leadership, vision, and reform that provide the path to resilience. Pakistan's challenges are real, complex, and rooted in both historical wounds and geopolitical realities. Yet the most dangerous narrative a country can adopt is one that sees every failure as the fault of another. Blaming foreign conspiracies, rival nations, or international institutions may ignite public anger, but it does not build schools, create jobs, or deliver justice. It is far easier to rally a nation against a foreign adversary than to confront the hard truths within one's own system. Corruption, mismanagement, inequality, and the erosion of public trust. Reform begins with honesty. It begins when a nation looks into the mirror and chooses truth over comfort. Why does education remain inaccessible to millions? Why does healthcare collapse in rural areas? Why does the justice system fail the weak and protect the powerful? These are not problems created by foreign hands. They are the results of domestic neglect, misplaced priorities, and a system that too often rewards loyalty over merit and silence over integrity. True change will not come from speeches. It will come from the strengthening of institutions, free and fair courts, transparent governance, independent media, and a bureaucracy that serves the people rather than controls them. Reform means making hard decisions that may upset the status quo. It means ending the culture of impunity. It means empowering local communities and protecting the rights of all citizens, regardless of faith, ethnicity, or political affiliation. Pakistan is a country of immense talent, history, and resilience. Its youth are ambitious and intelligent, eager to build, contribute, and innovate. But talent without opportunity becomes frustration, and frustration, when ignored, becomes instability. Reform must center around creating space for this new generation, not by exporting them abroad, but by giving them a future worth staying for. When the young are given voice and purpose, when the system rewards hard work and not connections, a country begins to rise from within. To reform is not to surrender. It is an act of courage. It takes more strength to admit failure and change course than to pretend success and march blindly forward. There will always be external pressures, neighboring tensions, global politics, economic dependencies, but no outside force can permanently weaken a country that is just, united, and accountable to its people, and no amount of foreign aid, investment, or alliances can save a country that refuses to reform itself. A stable Pakistan cannot be built on opposition to others. It must be built on service to its own. Regional peace, economic revival, and international respect will come when the world sees a Pakistan that is governed by rule of law, uplifted by education, and fueled by inclusion. This is not a utopian dream, it is a practical necessity. Countries that wait for the world to change while they remain stagnant are left behind, but countries that change themselves become the ones that lead. There is dignity in self-correction. There is strength in admitting that the path forward requires sacrifice and transformation, and there is immense hope when a nation finally decides that it will no longer define itself by who wronged it, but by what it is willing to make right within.